Welcome to Forgotten Pantheons, exploring lost gods and goddesses. For as long as humans have walked the earth, we've searched for meaning in the forces around us, the sun, the storms, the mysteries of birth and death. And so, across time and across continents, we created pantheons of gods. They were more than just myths. They were protectors, rulers, companions, and sometimes terrifying judges of human fate. But history is not kind to memory. For every Zeus we still know, there are hundreds of deities whose names have been erased by conquest, by language shifts, by time itself. Civilizations rose, flourished, and fell, and with them fell their gods. Temples crumbled, hymns went silent, and once great pantheons slipped into obscurity. This documentary is a journey into those shadows. We will unearth the forgotten pantheons of ancient civilizations, gods and goddesses once revered by millions, now remembered only faintly, if at all. Along the way, we'll ask difficult questions. Why do some gods endure while others fade away? What traces do they leave behind? And what do these forgotten deities reveal about the human spirit that created them? Over the course of 5 chapters, we'll move from the fading echoes of lost divinity into the rediscovery of ancient pantheons. Through their cultural impact, their lingering modern legacies, and finally, to the eternal question of belief itself. This is not just a history of gods long gone. It is a story of us, of humanity's endless quest for meaning, of the rise and fall of civilizations, and of the truths we choose to remember or forget. So settle in, open your imagination, and prepare to journey beyond the familiar into a world of mystery, myth, and rediscovery. The forgotten gods are waiting. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Fading Echoes of Divinity. Imagine standing beneath a night sky thousands of years ago. The stars are brilliant, unclouded by city lights, their constellations etched into the heavens like divine scripts. For the people of the ancient world, these lights were not empty sparks of burning gas, but living symbols, eyes of gods watching, messengers of fate, reminders that the cosmos itself was alive. Every culture in every corner of the earth filled its skies and lands with divinity. Rivers had spirits. Mountains had guardians. The winds were voices of unseen powers. To ancient peoples, the world itself was sacred, and gods were the living embodiment of that sacredness. They weren't abstract ideas. They were daily companions, woven into the fabric of survival. Today, when we think of gods, we recall familiar names. Zeus hurling lightning from Olympus, Odin one-eyed upon his throne in Asgard, Re steering the solar bark across Egypt's skies. But these are survivors of a much larger story. For every deity we still recognize, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands, whose names have been lost to time. Once adored, once feared, they are now shadows, broken fragments etched into stone tablets, faint inscriptions on temple ruins, or whispers passed into folklore. And so we must ask, what if the gods we know today are only a fraction of those once worshipped? What does it mean that entire pantheons have vanished, leaving behind only faint echoes of their glory? To understand forgotten pantheons, we must first understand the role of gods in human life. Religion in the ancient world was not a matter of personal faith in the modern sense. It was collective, binding, political, and practical. The gods governed every aspect of existence. Farmers prayed for rains and harvests. Soldiers offered sacrifices before battle. Rulers claimed divine favor to legitimize power. Entire cities identified themselves with their patron deities. To forget the gods was to forget life itself. And yet history shows us that gods are not immortal. They live and die with the cultures that worship them. When an empire crumbles, its pantheon begins to fade. Temples fall to ruin, rituals are abandoned, and the voices that once called out in hymns grow silent. Over generations, memory erodes. The once vivid personalities of gods dissolve into obscurity. Take the Hittites of ancient Anatolia. At their height, they were among the great powers of the late Bronze Age, rivals to Egypt and Mesopotamia. They proudly called themselves the people of 1,000 gods. Their pantheon was vast, a living tapestry woven from their own traditions and those of their neighbors. Deities of sky and storm, love and war, earth and underworld, all found their place. And yet today, outside of specialized historians, how many know the names of Tarchuna, the mighty storm god, or the goddess Lelwani, ruler of the underworld? Once thundered upon by priests and kings, their names now lie hidden in tablets dug from the earth, their temples reduced to foundations of stone. Or consider the Hurrians, a people whose influence stretched across the ancient. Their goddess Zoska was as powerful and complex as any deity in history. She was both lover and warrior, embodying beauty, desire, and destruction. She could appear in male or female form, blurring the boundaries of gender long before such ideas entered modern thought. Her cult spread far and wide, influencing neighboring myths, echoing even into Greek traditions. And yet Zoska herself is nearly forgotten, overshadowed by later goddesses who inherited fragments of her power. The fading of these gods is not a simple story of disappearance. Often forgotten deities live on in disguise. A storm god of one culture becomes the thunder god of another. A fertility goddess is reborn in new myths, her name changed but her essence intact. In this way, gods evolve as humans evolve. Belief is not erased. It is recycled, reshaped, rewritten. And so, hidden beneath the myths we think we know, the shadows of older pantheons remain. But why do some gods endure while others vanish? The answer lies in power, memory, and survival. When empires fall violently, their gods are swept aside. When new religions rise, they often erase or absorb older ones, branding them as false, demonic, or irrelevant. And when languages die, the names of the gods vanish with them, locked away in scripts no one can read until archaeologists stumble upon them centuries later. There is also the human factor. Memory itself is selective. We tend to remember what is retold, reinforced, and reshaped into stories that fit our present. Gods without surviving storytellers slip silently into darkness. And yet, even in forgetting, we leave traces. Forgotten pantheons survive in broken statues, mysterious inscriptions, and half-remembered rituals absorbed by later traditions. They are never gone entirely, only sleeping, waiting for rediscovery. As we move deeper into this documentary, we will awaken some of these sleeping gods. We will reconstruct their stories from fragments, revive their myths, and explore how their worship shaped the people who believed in them. We will see how forgotten pantheons influenced cultures far beyond their origins, leaving legacies we still feel today. The story of forgotten gods is not only about the past, it is also about us. It reveals how fragile belief can be, how quickly divine names can vanish, and yet how resilient the human need for meaning truly is. Gods rise, gods fall, but the impulse to create them endures. So let us listen to the fading echoes of divinity. They carry us back into the temples and rituals of long-lost civilizations. They remind us that the gods we know today are but survivors of a vast and forgotten multitude. And as we rediscover them, we rediscover something essential about ourselves. In the next chapter, we will step directly into one of these forgotten pantheons, piecing together the myths, rituals, and gods of a world nearly erased from memory. Their names may be obscure, but their stories are as vibrant as ever. The journey into forgotten divinity begins. Chapter 2. Unearthing the Obscure. A Pantheon's Revival. To truly begin our journey into forgotten pantheons, we must travel back over 3,000 years into the rugged mountains and fertile valleys of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Here, amid forests, rivers, and rolling plateaus, an empire once flourished, the Hittites. At their height, they rivaled the great civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mycenaean Greece. They forged mighty armies, signed treaties with pharaohs, and held sway over a vast territory. But above all, the Hittites lived under the watchful eyes of countless gods. So many, in fact, that they became known as Asterisk, the people of 1,000 gods. This was not poetic exaggeration. The Hittite pantheon was vast and complex, built like their empire itself, a patchwork of cultures, beliefs, and traditions. Every city had its own gods. Every conquered people brought their deities with them. Rather than erasing these divine beings, the Hittites absorbed them, adding more and more to their already overflowing pantheon. It was a divine mosaic where no god was forgotten until history forgot them all. At the heart of this pantheon was Tarkan-Ha, the storm god, a figure of thunder, rain, and kingship. In myth, Tarchuna was both fierce and essential, the bringer of storms that nourished crops, but could also unleash destruction. His image dominated Hittite temples, carved into stone reliefs with thunderbolts in hand. But Tarkana was not alone. His wife, Ariniti, the sun goddess of Arena, held a place of supreme reverence. She was the radiant queen of heaven, the motherly protector of the land. For the Hittites, the sun goddess was not distant. She was present in the cycles of the day, in the warmth of light and the rhythms of time itself. Together, the storm god and the sun goddess formed a divine partnership that reflected both power and balance, male and female, sky and sun. Then there was Hana, the grandmother goddess. She was ancient, wise, and full of authority, often stepping in when the cosmos teetered toward chaos. In one myth, when the storm god disappears, it is Hana who sets events in motion to bring him back. She sends out a tiny bee to search for him, commanding it to sting the missing god and restore him to consciousness. It is a tale of cosmic balance restored not by strength, but by persistence, humility, and the smallest of creatures. In the Hittite imagination, no power was too insignificant to play a role in divine order. The underworld, too, had its rulers. Lelwani, a deity of death, shifted in gender across myths, sometimes male, sometimes female, reflecting the fluid, mysterious nature of mortality. To the Hittites, death was not an end but a transition, and Lelawani embodied that shadowy passage. Rituals for the dead often invoked Lawani's name, ensuring safe passage into the underworld's dark realm. And then there was Zoska, borrowed from the neighboring Hurrians, yet beloved by the Hittites. She was dazzling and terrifying, a goddess of love, fertility, war, and healing. Her presence was both alluring and dangerous. In art, she appears with wings, attended by lion-headed beings, radiating both beauty and ferocity. Worship of Zoska spread widely, her songs and rituals echoing far beyond the Hittite heartland. This pantheon was not tidy. Unlike the Olympians of Greece, the Hittite gods were numerous, overlapping, and sometimes contradictory. One city's storm god might differ from another's. The Hittites managed this diversity through ritual diplomacy. Every god had to be honored, every divine relationship maintained. Neglecting one risked imbalance. Rituals were central. The Hittites practiced elaborate ceremonies involving food offerings, animal sacrifices, libations of wine, and music. Processions carried statues of gods through city streets. Kings served as high priests, binding their rule to divine favor. To lead the empire was to lead the gods in worship. One particularly important ritual was the Puruli festival, held in spring. It celebrated the myth of the storm god's battle against a serpent-like dragon, Ilyanka. In this myth, the storm god initially loses, defeated by the mighty creature. But through cunning, sometimes aided by the goddess Inara, he regains strength, defeats Ilyanka, and restores cosmic order. This myth was retold each year, reinforcing the cycle of struggle, defeat, and renewal. The serpent's defeat meant life, fertility, and prosperity for the land. Such myths reveal a deeper truth about Hittite religion. Their gods were not invincible. They could suffer, vanish, or be tricked. They mirrored human struggles, embodying fragility as much as strength. In their imperfection, the gods felt relatable, present in the daily lives of their people. But as history teaches us, no empire lasts forever. By the early 12th century BCE, the Hittite world collapsed. Waves of invasions, famine, internal strife, and the mysterious upheavals of the late Bronze Age brought their empire crashing down. Their great capital, Ketuka, once filled with temples and royal archives, was abandoned. The songs of the storm god and the sun goddess went silent. The people of 1,000 gods were no more. For centuries their memory vanished. Ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece lived on in the stories of later peoples. But the Hittites? They were forgotten, little more than a biblical footnote. Their gods, their myths, their very names were erased by time. It wasn't until the 19th century that their world began to stir again. Archaeologists digging in central Turkey uncovered strange ruins, massive stone gates, lion statues, and thousands of clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform. At first the language was unknown, but patient decipherment revealed something astonishing, the voice of a lost people, and with them their 1,000 gods. Through these tablets, the gods of the Hittites rose once more. We can now read their prayers, their treaties sworn by divine names, their myths etched in clay. We can hear the storm god's battles, the grandmother goddess's wisdom, the serpent's defeat, and the whispers of underworld deities guiding the dead. The rediscovery of the Hittites was one of archaeology's greatest revelations. And yet, outside of scholarly circles, their gods remain largely unknown. Tarkana is no Zeus. Hanahana is no Hera. Zoska is no Aphrodite. Though their myths rival those of Greece or Mesopotamia in depth and beauty, they dwell in obscurity. Why revive them now? Because in their forgotten names lies a lesson that gods are not eternal. They rise and fall with the empires that worship them. But in their fall they remind us of the fragility of memory, the impermanence of power, and the resilience of belief. The Hittites remind us that humanity has always sought meaning in storms, in the sun, in death, in love, and in the eternal cycles of renewal. Their gods speak to us still if we are willing to listen. And so, as we leave behind the Hittite pantheon, we do not let their voices fade again. Instead, we carry them forward, storm god, sun goddess, grandmother, underworld keeper, warrior queen, into the modern world as reminders of humanity's infinite imagination. In the next chapter, we will widen our scope beyond a single pantheon. We will see how forgotten gods, Hittite, Hurrian, and many others, shaped not only rituals and myths, but also art, architecture, and the very social fabric of their worlds. Even when forgotten, their fingerprints remain. The gods of the Hittites have been unearthed. Now, let us trace the echoes they left behind. When we think of ancient religion in the Mediterranean, one name dominates the stage: Rome. The Olympian gods, borrowed from Greece, became household figures across Europe. Yet beneath Rome's grandeur lies a forgotten foundation, one that shaped Roman religion long before Jupiter thundered in the skies. It is the mysterious, often overlooked world of the Etruscans, a people who believed the universe itself was alive, every moment infused with divine will. The Etruscans thrived in central Italy centuries before Rome became an empire. They were builders, traders, and above all, deeply spiritual innovators. Their pantheon was vast and dynamic, reflecting their belief in a cosmos governed by the gods in every detail. Unlike the Greeks, who sculpted deities in human form, or the later Romans, who organized their gods into neat hierarchies, the Etruscans saw divinity everywhere, in thunder, in rivers, in the boundaries of the human lifespan. At the heart of their theology were three mighty figures often called the Capitoline Triad: Tenia, Uni, and Menrava. Tenia was the Sky Father, a god of lightning and authority, reminiscent of Zeus or Jupiter, yet with a far more enigmatic character. His will was revealed not in myths, but in the crack of thunder, in bolts hurled across the sky. To the Etruscans, these were not random natural events, they were messages. Each strike carried divine meaning, demanding interpretation. Uni, the goddess of fertility and marriage, bore similarities to Hera and Juno. But unlike her Greek or Roman counterparts, she carried an air of sovereignty, embodying the very concept of divine authority. She was protector, ruler, and symbol of feminine strength all at once. And then came Menrava, a goddess of wisdom, war, and strategy, who would eventually inspire the Roman Minerva. Yet the Etruscan Menre was older, less defined by myth, and more rooted in ritual practice, embodying both intellect and the raw forces of creation. Beyond these three, the pantheon sprawled into dozens, even hundreds, of lesser deities. Each had their domain, each connected to human life in profound ways. There was Turan, goddess of love and vitality, whose presence lingered in every embrace, every birth, every bond of affection. There was Fuflans, god of wine, joy, and renewal, worshipped in ecstatic celebrations that revealed the Etruscans' deep respect for life's cycles of death and rebirth. And then there was the figure who embodied one of the most haunting concepts in Etruscan belief, the god Charon. Unlike the graceful ferryman Charon of Greek lore, the Etruscan Charon was terrifying. He bore a hammer instead of an oar, a grotesque figure who guarded the passage between life and death. For the Etruscans, death was not an end, but a transition, and Charon was both feared and respected as the unavoidable gatekeeper of that crossing. His grim visage appears painted on tomb walls, a constant reminder that life's fragility was always in the god's hands. To understand the Etruscan pantheon, we must also understand their unique obsession with divination. Unlike the Greeks, who told long, elaborate myths of their gods, the Etruscans focused on ritual and signs. They believed that the gods communicated directly with humans through lightning, through the flight of birds, through the livers of sacrificed animals. This discipline, known as haruspicy, became so influential that even the Romans adopted it, employing Etruscan priests to interpret omens well into the imperial era. Every decision, from planting crops to waging wars, was filtered through the divine messages revealed in these sacred practices. But why, then, are the Etruscan gods forgotten? The answer lies in Rome itself. As Rome rose, it absorbed and rebranded much of Etruscan religion. Tinia merged with Jupiter. Uni became Juno. Minerva was reborn as Minerva. The Etruscan gods survived, but only in disguise, their true forms and rituals erased beneath Roman dominance. Over generations, their unique identities faded, leaving behind little more than fragments and inscriptions, tomb paintings, and a handful of sacred texts. And yet echoes of their pantheon endure. When we speak of the Roman gods, we unknowingly invoke the Etruscans. Their ritual of divination influenced centuries of statecraft. Their concepts of divine law and cosmic order laid groundwork for later religious systems. Even their funerary art, vivid, symbolic, and deeply spiritual, still whispers of a world where gods and humans lived in constant dialogue. The story of the Etruscan pantheon is one of transformation. Though their names may be lost, their essence still shapes us. It is a reminder that gods do not always die when civilizations collapse. Sometimes they change their faces and slip quietly into the next age. As we leave behind the Etruscans, we are left with a haunting question. How many more pantheons have been buried by history, their gods reshaped, renamed, or erased entirely? If Rome, the eternal city, could not preserve the true memory of its spiritual predecessors, what hope remains for the countless others swallowed by time? The journey into forgotten divinity continues. We leave behind the Etruscan hills of Italy and journey eastward into the shifting sands and fertile valleys of the Near East, where another forgotten pantheon once flourished, the gods of the Mitanni. The Mitanni kingdom, a powerful force in the 5th, 10th, and 14th centuries BCE, rose in the region we now call northern Syria and southeastern Turkey. Their empire was short-lived, but their pantheon offers us a glimpse into a crossroads of cultures. The Mitanni gods were unlike those of their neighbors, for their pantheon was not purely Mesopotamian nor wholly Hurrian. Instead, it carried whispers of something older, something from farther east, echoes of the Vedic gods of ancient India. Treaties and royal inscriptions tell us that Mitanni kings swore oaths by the names of 4 deities: Mitra, Varna, Indra, and the Nasates. These names are unmistakably Indo-Aryan, drawn from the same sacred traditions that gave rise to the Rig Veda. Imagine it, in a Near Eastern court, kings invoking the very gods that Brahmins were chanting hymns to thousands of miles away. How did these deities travel so far? Scholars suggest that Indo-Aryan elites once migrated westward, embedding their gods into the Mitanni state. Indra, the warrior god of thunder and battle, appears as a guarantor of treaties. Mitra and Varuna, associated with law, order, and contracts, gave divine weight to human agreements. The Nasateas, twin gods of health and healing, offered their protection to rulers and armies alike. Here we see a pantheon less focused on mythological storytelling and more on governance, legitimacy, and divine sanction. But the Mitanni's gods did not endure. Their empire was fragile, pressed between Egypt, the Hittites, and Assyria. When the Mitanni kingdom collapsed, its Indo-Aryan deities vanished from the Near East, their memory surviving only in scattered treaties and the faintest of linguistic traces. Unlike the Etruscans, whose gods lived on through Rome, the Mitanni pantheon was extinguished almost completely, leaving us with haunting fragments that connect the ancient Near East to the distant rhythms of Vedic hymns. And yet, across the world, another forgotten pantheon was rising, one entirely separate from the old world's great civilizations. We crossed the ocean to the jungles and plains of Mesoamerica, where the Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Central America, worshipped gods both terrifying and sublime. The Olmecs flourished from around 1500 to 400 BCE, long before the Maya or the Aztecs. They left no written texts, but their colossal stone heads, intricate carvings, and ritual sites reveal the outlines of a pantheon, unlike any other. Central to their religion was the enigmatic figure scholars call the Olmec dragon, a composite deity with features of a jaguar, serpent, eagle, and human. This god embodied the forces of earth, sky, and fertility all at once, a primal expression of power that defies easy classification. Then there was the word jaguar, a deity of rain, storms, and agricultural fertility. Often depicted with a downturned mouth and almond-shaped eyes, this figure appears in carvings, figurines, and ceremonial objects. To the Olmecs, the jaguar was the most powerful predator of their world, and in its fusion with human form, it became a bridge between man and the divine. Some scholars believe the word jaguar represents a shamanic transformation, the merging of human spirit with animal strength. Other deities included the bird monster, associated with the heavens and rulership, and the fish monster linked to water, the underworld, and the cycle of life and death. Unlike the ordered Olympian pantheons of Greece or Rome, the Olmec gods were fluid, shifting, and symbolic, less about neat hierarchies, more about elemental forces woven into the fabric of existence. Like the Etruscans and the Mitanni, the Olmec gods too faded. When the Olmec civilization declined, their deities transformed, re-emerging centuries later in the pantheons of the Maya and the Aztecs. The rain god Tlaloc, worshipped by the Aztecs, bears striking resemblance to the Olmec word jaguar. The feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl may have roots in Olmec iconography. The Olmecs, though forgotten, seeded divine archetypes that would dominate Mesoamerican spirituality for millennia. Together, these three pantheons, Etruscan, Mitanni, and Olmec, show us how fragile divine memory truly is. Some gods survive in disguise, like the Etruscan deities reborn as Roman figures. Others vanish almost entirely, like the Mitanni's Indo-Aryan gods, leaving only faint echoes in treaties and texts. And still others transform like the Olmec gods, flowing into later cultures in new forms. In rediscovering them, we see more than just forgotten names. We see the vast diversity of human imagination, the many ways civilizations have reached toward the divine. We see how gods, like the people who worship them, rise and fall with the tides of history. And so, as Chapter 2 closes, we are left with a deepening realization. The gods we know are but survivors, fragments of a once much greater whole. What other pantheons have been lost to us? How many divine voices have been silenced by conquest, assimilation, or time? The search continues. In the next chapter, we turn to the question of impact. How even forgotten gods, stripped of their worshippers, left indelible marks on the world they once ruled. The gods may be forgotten, but their fingerprints remain. Civilizations rise and fall, yet the pantheons they worshipped leave traces far deeper than names on a tablet or images carved in stone. To understand the true weight of forgotten gods, we must step beyond myth and look at the ways they shaped the world, through art, architecture, ritual, and even the psychology of belief. Consider the Hittites. Their empire collapsed around 1200 BCE, but the echoes of their pantheon are still with us. Their storm god, Tarhunt, once struck fear and awe across Anatolia. Today, fragments of his likeness adorn ruined temples and carved rock sanctuaries. The site of Yatsilikaya, with its long procession of deities etched into stone, shows us how the Hittites envisioned the universe itself as a divine assembly. Even though Tarhunt's name is barely known outside academic circles, his image and symbolism helped inspire the storm gods of later Anatolian and even Greco-Roman traditions. What began as devotion became cultural inheritance. In Etruria, the gods lived on not through myth, but through practice. The Etruscans developed an entire system of divination, reading omens in lightning, in bird flight, and in animal entrails. When Rome rose, it did not abandon this system. Instead, Roman priests adopted Etruscan practices wholesale. Every major decision in the Roman Republic and Empire, from declaring war to passing laws, was filtered through rituals first practiced by a people whose gods we no longer even name. The Etruscan pantheon was forgotten, but its methods shaped Roman politics for centuries. The Olmecs, too, remind us that deities do not vanish cleanly. Their gods, jaguar, serpent, bird, were elemental, symbolic, and fluid. When the Olmecs disappeared, their gods survived by mutating into the pantheons of the Maya and Aztecs. The rain god, Chak of the Maya, the storm god, Tlaloc of the Aztecs, and even the great feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. All of these divine figures carry Olmec DNA. We may not know the original names the Olmecs spoke in their prayers, but their essence continues to ripple through Mesoamerican culture. This pattern repeats across the world. Forgotten pantheons left behind temples that became quarries for new cities, myths that became seeds for later religions, and rituals that persisted long after their gods were unnamed. Even in death, gods influence the living. But beyond physical remains, there is a more profound legacy, the human echo. Pantheons reveal what mattered most to the societies that worshipped them. The Hurrians, with their complex assemblies of gods, remind us of a world defined by shifting alliances and fragile kingdoms. The Mitanni, who carried Indo-Aryan deities into the Near East, show us how divine ideas could migrate across continents, reshaping identities in the process. The Olmecs, who fused human and animal forms in divine hybrids, speak of a worldview where boundaries between man, beast, and God were fluid. And here lies the mystical truth. When a pantheon fades, it is never truly gone. The gods linger, half-remembered, reshaped, reimagined. Their names may be forgotten, their temples may crumble, but they survive in dreams, in archetypes, in the stories we tell even today. Think of the storm god, Tarhunt, Zeus, Thor. Across cultures and centuries, we return to the image of a god who hurls thunder from the sky. The names change, but the archetype endures. Somewhere in the collective memory of humanity, the ancient gods still stir. Or the jaguar spirit of the Olmecs. Though we no longer worship in their temples, the jaguar continues to haunt our imagination, appearing in modern art and literature, in the very symbols of power and transformation. The archetype of the shapeshifter, the human fused with animal essence, is as alive in comic books and fantasy novels as it was in the Olmec jungles. Forgotten pantheons also return in subtler ways. We find them in the pages of novels, in the pixels of video games, and films that blend old myths with modern storytelling. A player guiding a warrior through a digital underworld unknowingly reenacts rituals once performed before long-dead gods. A reader swept into an epic fantasy unknowingly calls upon archetypes that trace back to forgotten temples. The gods are not gone. They have simply changed their masks. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of forgotten pantheons. They remind us that divinity is not static. It is a cycle. Gods rise, flourish, and fade, only to be reborn in new forms, in new places, among new people. Just as the Etruscan Menre became Minerva, and the Olmec jaguar became Teluk, so too may today's gods one day dissolve, leaving behind echoes that future civilizations will reinterpret anew. There is something deeply humbling in this thought. We are not so different from the ancients who carved their gods into stone or painted them on temple walls. We too are building pantheons through stories, through culture, through the symbols we hold sacred. And one day our gods, whether they be religious, cultural, or ideological, may also become forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered by a distant future. So when we speak of forgotten pantheons, we are not simply recounting history. We are listening for whispers in the present, glimpsing the ways in which the divine continues to live among us. For the gods are never truly silent. They live in memory, in imagination, and in the eternal human search for meaning. As we leave this chapter, we must ask ourselves, are these pantheons really lost, or do they still walk beside us in disguise? If forgotten gods still shape our imagination, then perhaps they are not dead at all, Perhaps they are waiting patiently for us to remember their names. In the next chapter, we will explore these echoes more directly, tracing how the forgotten pantheons of antiquity continue to resurface in the modern world, in scholarship, in creativity, and in the very culture that surrounds us today. Civilizations leave more than ruins. They leave frameworks of thought, worldviews encoded in art, language, and ritual. Even when gods are no longer worshipped, their imprint persists, subtle, yet profound. Forgotten pantheons are not simply curiosities of ancient myth. They are historical forces whose influence can be traced through architecture, symbols, and cultural memory. Take the Hittites, for instance. Their pantheon, dominated by the storm god Tarhant, the sun goddess of Arana, and countless local deities, reflected a complex cosmology. At Yetzelikaya, the great rock sanctuary near Hattusa, processions of carved gods and goddesses present a visual theology. Deities ordered by rank, paired in male and female dyads, embodying cosmic balance. To the Hittites, divinity was not abstract. It was territorial, tied to mountains, rivers, and cities. When the empire collapsed in the late Bronze Age, their gods did not vanish overnight. Instead, they were absorbed, reshaped, or quietly forgotten as Assyrian, Phrygian, and later Greek cultures rose in their stead. This pattern repeats across the world. In Mesoamerica, the Olmec civilization is often remembered for colossal stone heads. Yet behind the stone lies a vibrant, though partly reconstructed, pantheon. Scholars identify motifs of a rain spirit, a precursor to later deities, like Tlaloc, alongside jaguar-human hybrids, and sky dragons. These figures were not mere decoration. They were integral to Olmec identity, embedded in ritual sites aligned with celestial events. Though their names are lost, the gods themselves left enduring archetypes that would echo through later Maya and Aztec religion. Even in the case of the Mitanni, a kingdom straddling ancient Syria and Anatolia in the 2nd millennium BCE, divine traces remain. Through treaties and royal inscriptions, we know they invoked deities like Mitra, Varuna, Indra, and Nasatya, strikingly similar to gods later immortalized in the Vedic tradition of India. These texts suggest a cultural bridge between Indo-Aryan and Near Eastern traditions. The Mitanni pantheon, while politically marginalized by Hittites and Assyrians, reflects how divine systems migrated, blended, and persisted across regions. The cultural impact of forgotten pantheons lies not only in what survives, but in what they reveal about human needs. Gods organized time, justified kingship, sanctified war, and explained natural forces. Even when their names fade, the structures of belief remain reconfigured but recognizable. The persistence of storm gods, fertility deities, and underworld rulers across civilizations underscores how human societies independently arrived at similar spiritual archetypes. In this sense, the study of forgotten gods is not antiquarian. It is a lens into continuity. What we see in a weather-worn carving or a half-deciphered hymn is not just history. It is a reminder of how cultures grappled with the eternal. Forgotten pantheons whisper that humanity has always sought order, meaning, and transcendence, and that the gods, though silent, still shape us through the legacies they left behind. The gods may be forgotten, but their shadows stretch into the present. While Zeus, Odin, or Isis still hold a place in popular imagination, entire pantheons that once commanded empires now exist only as fragments in scholarly texts. And yet, their presence lingers, hidden in our architecture, symbols, literature, and even the digital landscapes of modern gaming and storytelling. Consider the jaguar deities of the Olmec. Though nameless to us, their snarling visages and hybrid forms appear today in comic books, video games, and fantasy novels, testaments to humanity's enduring fascination with the primal blend of human and beast. Likewise, the Mitanni's invocation of gods like Mitra and Varuna reveals how belief systems traveled. What began as treaties scratched into clay tablets now resonates through Vedic hymns, still recited after 3 millennia. Forgotten pantheons, it seems, are not as lost as we imagine. Modern media acts as a second afterlife for these gods. The storm gods of Anatolia inspire characters in role-playing games. Mesoamerican rain spirits surface in films and novels. Even the academic pursuit of reconstructing these pantheons breathes life back into them, as archaeologists, linguists, and historians reassemble their identities piece by piece. Each discovery, a carved stele, a deciphered inscription, a ritual object unearthed from the soil, is an act of resurrection. But the echoes reach beyond entertainment and scholarship. Forgotten gods remind us that human belief is cyclical. What disappears may re-emerge in new forms. When we see motifs of fertility goddesses adapted into modern feminist iconography, or serpent deities reborn in global pop culture, we are witnessing ancient ideas finding fresh voices. Ultimately, these unseen legacies challenge us to reflect on the power of cultural memory. We may no longer leave offerings at their shrines, but the questions these gods once embodied about life, death, power, and the cosmos remain central to our existence. The forgotten pantheons still walk beside us, not as objects of devotion, but as silent companions in the ever-evolving human search for meaning. Belief is a living current, flowing through the human story as consistently as language or art. From the caves of Lascaux to the temples of Babylon, from the sacred mountains of the Andes to the digital landscapes of today, humans have always made meaning through the divine. And yet, the gods themselves are never permanent. They rise with cultures, evolve with societies, and fade when their time has passed. This cycle, birth, glory, and forgetting, leads us inevitably to the eternal question, what comes next for belief? History provides the foundation for our speculation. Consider the pantheons we've explored. The Hittites shaped a divine order that mirrored their empire, complex, hierarchical, and cosmopolitan, borrowing deities from neighbors and fusing them into a single grand procession of gods. When their empire collapsed, those gods did not vanish but were absorbed into Assyrian, Phrygian, and later Greek systems. Similarly, the Olmecs jaguar and rain deities were not extinguished, but transmuted into the storm gods and fertility, spirits of later Mesoamerican civilizations. Even the Mitanni, whose kings invoked Indo-Aryan deities like Mitra and Varuna, remind us that gods migrate, blending across cultures in ways that outlive kingdoms. The lesson is clear. The gods of today may be the echoes of tomorrow. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, these traditions, though powerful and global, are not immune to the same tides of history. One day, perhaps centuries or millennia from now, they too may be reduced to fragments, broken icons in museums, passages in textbooks, digital traces buried in archives. Future generations may look back at our age with the same mixture of awe and distance with which we regard the Hittites or the Olmecs. But this is not an argument for cynicism. It is a testament to continuity. The fall of one pantheon makes space for another, because the human impulse toward the sacred does not die. We invent gods because we need them. Gods personify chaos, justice, fertility, the stars, and the afterlife, the great mysteries that science alone cannot fully answer on an emotional level. And as our world changes, so do the forms of our divinities. Already, we are seeing the early outlines of what might be called the Pantheon of the future. Consider how we speak about technology. The algorithm knows, the system decides, the cloud stores. These are not just metaphors. They are linguistic rituals, hints of reverence toward forces beyond our comprehension. Artificial intelligence, markets, climate, and even concepts like progress or freedom may one day be venerated with the same intensity as storm gods or fertility goddesses. It is not hard to imagine a distant future where an AI interface becomes an oracle, its responses treated as sacred wisdom. In another sense, we are already creating new pantheons in the realm of imagination. Popular culture has elevated superheroes, fantasy characters, and science fiction figures to mythic status. Thor, once a Norse deity, now strides across cinema screens as both entertainment and modern myth. In comic books, films, and video games, archetypes of ancient gods, the trickster, the warrior, the deathbringer, the mother goddess, live again, clothed in new stories. For millions, these figures function not unlike the old pantheons. They inspire, instruct, and embody values. Scholars describe this as metapausis, the continuous human act of myth-making. From the earliest chants around the fire to the streaming platforms of today, humanity weaves gods into its narratives. The forgotten pantheons are proof that while gods may be forgotten, God-making never ceases. And what of the distant horizon? What will belief look like 1,000 years from now? Perhaps humanity will expand into the stars, carrying with it a new set of cosmic gods born of interstellar travel. Or perhaps belief will turn inward, venerating human consciousness itself as the ultimate divine force. There may be pantheons yet unimagined, emerging from cultures we cannot predict, in languages not yet spoken. And someday they too may be forgotten, their temples buried, their stories fragmented, their names whispered only by scholars and dreamers. Yet the forgotten gods teach us something vital. Oblivion is not the same as disappearance. Even when a god falls silent, its archetype lives on, waiting to be reborn. The jaguar spirit becomes a comic book hero. The storm god becomes a video game boss. The fertility goddess becomes an icon of resilience and creativity. Forgotten pantheons show us that the divine is eternal in essence, even if its forms are ever-changing. So what's next for belief? The answer may be this: whatever humanity needs it to be. Gods are mirrors, reflecting our fears, our hopes, and our search for meaning. As long as humanity dreams, suffers, and strives, there will be gods. Some will rise to glory, some will fade into dust, and one day our own gods may be counted among the forgotten, waiting for another age to rediscover them, and to marvel at the echoes they left behind.